Paul Kearney is one of the pioneers of enterprise education. He designed and managed Australia's first student enterprise program that directly linked developing enterprising attributes with all parts of the curriculum. He spoke to a group of teachers about how enterprising education can transform teaching and learning.
This is sort of my definition. Well, enterprising education really is about being enterprising in everything you do, trying to create enterprising students through enterprising classrooms, enterprising teachers and enterprising authorities. And by enterprising we mean using your initiative, being resourceful, solving problems, being opportunistic in all areas of your life, not just commercial areas. My view of it is that most of what we're doing, including setting up business, is enterprising. When that happens in a commercial context, it's called entrepreneurship. There's lots of argument about which is which. What we use there, being enterprising, in that I call broad definition, and being entrepreneurial, business orientated, is a narrow definition. Now that doesn't mean that one's better than the other. An enterprising approach to learning as opposed to a less enterprising approach to learning is really to a degree how much students are encouraged or even required to use initiative, resourcefulness, etc., enterprising skills and behaviours in the way they learn, actually as opposed to having less opportunities to use initiative, to be resourceful, etc., and solve problems in the way they learn. And we often rob young people of those opportunities by caring, by mistake, in fact. Have a look at that. Consume it. There's some interesting research that suggests, anyway, that by the beginning of year 5, entry level, that 5-year-olds display moderate to high degrees of enterprise and behaviour, whereas 10 years later, when they're 15 years old and they're in high school or secondary school, only 3% display those sort of behaviours to a moderate and high degree. So in many ways you could say that there is a de-enterprising effect going on in schools. And there's something incredible about that, isn't there? This de-enterprising thing. So there is an argument that you could put forward that encouraging enterprising activity in our young people and attributes and so probably could be more about what we don't do than what we do do. And we don't have to blame schools about that. We can blame parents as well. We can blame Nintendo games, TV, anyway, whatever it is. It's not schools alone. But schools must take some responsibility in that, because if they don't, we're saying we have no effect. We might as well pack up and go home. It's a great example of where we jump in, and by doing so, we rob young people of the opportunity. And that was with my son. It was that difficult time in life where he had to learn to tie his shoes. It was the morning where everyone had to get to work, we all had to go to schools, my other daughter had to go to a different place, so people are yelling at my young son, Tom, come on, hurry up, hurry up. And of course that was making him more frustrated. He had less chance to sit back, work out what he was doing, be resourceful, pay a little bit more attention about how he may do it, repeat it and so on. Now, because he got frustrated, he gave up virtually. And I jumped in and said, okay, let me do it. Right? And just by the simplest little things like that, I had robbed him of the opportunity to use his enterprising characteristics or solve problems or whatever you might want to call those things. Now, we do the same sort of thing in education, and we often do it where a child may be having difficulty working out a problem. So what we do is we jump in. And we fix it straight away because we think that's our responsibility and we think we're actually caring for that child, when in fact we're robbing the young person of the opportunity to use those skills. So if we go back to the attributes that you needed to be enterprising, okay, planning, what else? Risk-taking. Could you put organising in there? Open-minded, yeah. Patience, determination, resilience, communication. We're talking about a broader definition here where we encourage young people to be enterprising in all facets of their life, at all times, and not just in a small business sense, where someone has called it, myself in fact, tycoons in short pants approach. But also I go a bit further and say that it's not just teaching it's not just teaching about small business, it's teaching English, it's teaching mathematics, all the other subjects. The curriculum, in fact, through a more enterprising pedagogy where students have the opportunity to use their initiative, resourcefulness, etc., in terms of enterprising skills. If you use an enterprising pedagogy, which means using enterprising skills in the way you teach, you'll get better curriculum outcomes. Students will be more engaged, they'll be more interested, and I think to a degree they will be encouraged to learn more. But as a result of learning those in an enterprising way, I'd believe that enterprise skills are almost developed as a byproduct. You find opportunities, right, to learn in a more enterprising way, I would say, by referring back to the great principles of progressive education. And I mean, well, beyond the great principles. In fact, I would call them progressive traditions. And these, if you look at, you'll find more opportunities in areas like ownership, as it's commonly called, where students are allowed to take more responsibility for what they do, control it in many ways, allowing to manage those things which teachers may wish to manage but don't necessarily need to manage. I can go into a classroom and one of the first things I would look at is where is the responsibility for the learning? Is the teacher doing most of it? Or is the responsibility for making the learning happen more down at the student's end? Now, the other area where I think that students have got a lot of opportunity to develop, to learn in a more enterprising way is in the area of which is commonly called experiential learning, which I happen to call first-hand learning. You learn from first-hand experience, and that involves young people learning from doing authentic types of learning. How much are the students learning first-hand from first-hand experience? Is it right up here in the experience, deep in experiential learning from first-hand experience, a thing you're doing right now or will be doing soon or you're planning for? Or is it more up in that concrete area? Right? Or is it more up towards the abstract? Right? Learning second-hand, which is great. Right? And that, to me, abstract conceptual learning is nothing more than experiential learning, which has been undertaken throughout the period of a long time, tested, refined, put into books, put into teachers' hands, who then put it into kids. It's not just letting the students go off, on their own. Someone has said the real job of education is to inspire young people and then get out of the way. Right? Well, I believe in the inspiring bit, but I don't necessarily accept getting out of the way. I think we do have some responsibility and, in fact, some skill at guiding young people to make that experience far more productive. It doesn't just happen as a result of experience. Okay, the other thing I'm looking for is reflective learning. Where is the reflection? Is it planned? Is it deliberate? Is it structured? Or is it up here and it's haphazard, unplanned, accidental? Now, to put it frankly, as I tend not to do, from an experience, students will not learn through osmosis, from an experiential learning happening, whatever you want to call it. They will not learn by osmosis. The learning will not soak up through their feet, right, into their brains, and somehow turn into usable information that they can use later on, which will help them to learn, help them to live later on. We need to do things like we need a structured approach. What happened? What does it mean? So what is a big thing. You need things like assessment. Right? You've got a big thing here, assessment for learning. Right? That's a form of reflection to me. The other great area, the progressive tradition of education where we can have plenty of opportunities to learn in an enterprising way, is learning in a cooperative way. We know that people naturally learn with and from each other, and they enjoy it. It isn't a great old tradition. Since we were in communes, in villages, we have learnt with and from each other. And you notice with and from, everyone's a teacher. Right? You learn by teaching, students learn by teaching, other students, peer teaching, all that sort of thing. You also learn by working together, as long as it's not just pooling ignorance. These things are not rocket science. It's about having some principles, which commonly, every day you can ask yourself the big questions. How can I get the students to take more responsibility for how they're going to learn today. How can I get them to learn more from first-hand experience, right, today? How can I make them learn in a more cooperative way today? How can I help students to think about what they have learned, right, and to turn that into meaning and answer that big question, so what? How can I use that in the future? If I have those just above my cubicle in my staff room, as other teachers have done, it would just give them simple ideas. Well, maybe today I can use a cooperative approach to assessment, peer assessment. Maybe today is a good opportunity to do that. Maybe it's not today, right? You need to know some principles before you do things, because you'll just head into failure if you don't. And we know that failure is not necessarily a great thing. People will say, oh, hairy-chested enterprise education, kids learn, failure is a natural part of life, let them learn, take some risks. Well, I happen to think that failure in the wrong place, without using it correctly, can be quite negative, really. I think it's overestimated. I think what is underestimated is learning from success. My argument would be that, yes, enterprising education the teacher needs to step back, right? There needs to be a more authentic approach to learning. There needs to be more emphasis placed on what does it mean and so what. And there needs to be more opportunities to learn with and from each other. But that doesn't involve just the teacher letting go and stepping back. We have a responsibility, I think, to help students succeed. Our children, our young people these days, operate in what I would call the realm of choice. They can choose whether or not to be enterprising, choose whether or not to do all sorts of things. But we know now, without agonising over all this, we know now that our students, our young people, are rapidly moving in, because of changes in the world, rapidly moving into a realm of necessity. And that's one of the difficulties. In the past, when they were in a realm of choice, and some of them still are, it's very difficult to persuade them, to encourage them to be enterprising. We agree? And what we tend to do is scare the hell out of them. You won't get a decent job, all this, all that sort of thing. Another outcome of learning in an enterprising way, which I think is really important, is the ability to learn in a lifelong manner. Now, being able to manage your own learning, to be able to understand the resources you need, to be able to work out where the opportunities are, is what you might call self-managed learning. Now, without self-managed learning these days, you're in deep trouble in the workforce, because it's determining to a great degree the have-mores and the have-lesses of society. And of course, in a larger sense, it's a matter of dealing with change. Things are changing so quickly, right, at the workplace in particular. And I think that just by allowing students to use their initiative, to be resourceful, to be determined, to be opportunistic in the way they learn, all those enterprising attributes throughout the subject area, as often as possible, in that wide range of contexts, we have the best opportunity of teaching them to be enterprising, the best opportunity we have to help them to face all these demands and opportunities, right, of the future.